So I decided to try and make mozzarella. Now before we get into why I was holding a blowtorch and why I might have been on the floor crying, let's go over the recipe I used real quick. You're gonna start off with a gallon of whole milk. It doesn't have to be raw. You can use regular pasteurized, homogenized milk. If you try to use ultra pasteurized milk, you will fail every single time. You're going to want to pour that entire gallon into a large pot, and while stirring, add 1.5 teaspoons of citric acid mixed with 1 cup of water. Next, put the pot on the stove at medium-low heat while stirring occasionally until it reaches 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you're at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to remove it from the stove, and you're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of rennet mixed with 1/4 cup of water. And as soon as that rennet hits the milk, you're going to stir it gently for 25 seconds, and being sure not to stir it any longer, as this will break up the curd. After you stir it for 25 seconds, you're going to cover the pot and let it sit for 5 minutes. After it sits for 5 minutes, you should have a gelatinous mass of curd sitting on top of the whey. You'll be able to tell by moving the pot around and seeing that it separates from the sides, and you should also be able to touch it and not get too much back on your finger. If that's not the case, let it sit for another 5 minutes, and if it still doesn't set up, then you're probably gonna have cottage cheese. Now after your curd is set, you're gonna take a knife going all the way to the bottom of the pan, and you're gonna cut the curd into 1 by 1 squares. Now the next step is super important. At this point, you're gonna put a hand on each side of the pot, and you're gonna twist that pot back and forth just to be mesmerized by the curds. Okay, I'm kidding, it's totally optional, but highly recommended because it's cool. After you're done watching the dancing curds, you're gonna take the pot and put it back on medium-low heat, stirring occasionally until it gets to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it gets there, the curds should all be sunk to the bottom of the pan. If they're not sunk to the bottom of the pan, then it's not done. You need to take the temperature again and double check, because what happens is as you heat the curds, some of the whey seeps out of them and, well, like I said, they sink. Now it's time to strain the curds. I've done it with a slotted spoon, I've done it with a ladle, and I've done it by just dumping them into a colander. Either way works fine. No matter what, in the end, you're gonna end up dumping the whey. It's a little less splashy if you get some of the curds out first though. Once the curds are strained, you're gonna gather them together, and you're gonna start squeezing as much of the whey out of them as you can. After that, just stick them in a small mixing bowl, and you're gonna take some of your whey solution, and you're gonna dump it into the mixing bowl until the curds are covered. Then remove the curds from the whey and put them back in your colander or in the other part of your whey solution. And you're gonna add a tablespoon or about 10 grams of salt to your whey solution that you just measured out in the small mixing bowl. Take the whey out of the small mixing bowl and dump it into a saucepan, and you're gonna heat that up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it reaches 180 degrees Fahrenheit, transfer it back into that bowl and take your curds and stick them into that salted whey solution. This is how you're gonna flavor your cheese. After about 30 to 40 seconds, your cheese should be warmed up, and you can begin stretching and folding until you get a smooth mass of cheese. Now there's a chance that you're gonna have to reheat your whey. I know I did, and I did this by just sticking in the microwave for 15 to 30 second intervals. It'll depend on your microwave. Purists might get upset about it, but it worked out fine for me, and I ended up actually doing it like 2 or 3 times. So once you have a smooth mass of cheese, you're just gonna divide it up into 4 balls or however many you want. You don't have to divide it up at all. My first batch I kept in 1 large chunk. Once it's divided, you're gonna let it set in a bowl of room temperature whey for 20 minutes. Now the cheese will keep for several days, but it really is best to eat it fresh, but it's totally worth it, and I honestly ended up eating like half of a batch by myself, just snacking in front of the TV. It was pretty good, guys. Stop, don't go, it's not over. There's some more information that you're gonna wanna have. The recipe is pretty simple and straightforward, but in my 8 attempts, there were definitely some issues I ran into. One of the things I didn't realize until after I started was that this cheese has a pretty high failure rate for beginners. Now, this made me feel really stupid because it's so straightforward. By my 3rd attempt, I felt like there might be something wrong with me, and I was, to say the least, a little bit demoralized. But if you have a rough go like me, don't worry, keep going. When you win, it'll feel great. The number one reason that caused me failure was probably temperature. One thing I found was that as the milk heats in the pan, the convection causes hot spots, and you can see your thermometer suddenly jump like 10 or 15 degrees, and you're like, holy crap, I screwed it up. But no, that's not what's going on. If this happens to you, don't freak out. Just measure in a different spot. You can even remove it from the heat for a second if you want, and you'll probably see the temperature drop back down to about where it was before it jumped. Another issue I ran into is I bought a candy thermometer from Walmart that was just absolute garbage. Just make sure you have a thermometer that that you can count on. The next issue I ran into was milk. I definitely had the best results from raw milk. It was more consistent, it tasted better, and the texture was better, but the cost was a big issue. My options were $12 a gallon from the local milk truck or $6 a gallon plus a 30-minute drive to the nearest farm. Like I said, I got some pretty inconsistent results from pasteurized homogenized milk, and I'm not sure how much of that were my temperature issues or not, but I absolutely liked my raw milk results the best. Now, if you are like me and end up having to try several times to get good results, do not throw your mistakes away. What you'll end up with is something similar to cottage cheese or ricotta. You can season it how you want, you can experiment. If you get it dry enough, it'll kind of crumble and you can use it kind of like grated mozzarella. And you never know, if you experiment enough, it might work out for you. You might discover something that other people don't know. For example, I read that you cannot fix your mozzarella cheese once you get a batch that doesn't come together. Well, what I did was I put my cheese into the brine solution in my saucepan on the stove and I heated it up and it started to come together, and I wasn't even trying to do that. I was just trying to experiment flavoring it, but it worked out. So experiment or use it in a more conventional way, but do not throw it away. Finally, you're gonna end up, especially if you screw up like me a bunch of times, with a bunch of whey in your fridge. Don't dump it down the drain. You can use it for all kinds of things, just don't throw it away. It's wasteful and dumb, and you're dumping something down the drain that you paid for. Well, I hope you found some of this information useful. If you did and would like some more useful information, feel free to watch my masterpiece of a video on how to make your own butter. Please like, share, subscribe, and I really hope to see you next time.